Okay, let's start with a really unsettling question. What if one of the most devastating pandemics in modern history wasn't an accident at all? Today, we're going to dive into the claims of a really controversial book from 2013 that argues exactly that. It paints a pretty disturbing alternative history of a global tragedy.
The book is called The Second Holocaust. And look, just so we're all on the same page here, our goal is not to prove or disprove any of this. We're simply here to walk you through the pretty extraordinary story that the author lays out.
And there it is. I mean, the explosive claim is right there on the cover. You can't miss it. The author isn't, just hinting at some vague conspiracy. He's alleging a meticulously planned plot, one that unfolded over decades, orchestrated by the CIA itself. So, a second Holocaust? That's a seriously provocative title. What's the core accusation behind it? All right, let's break it down. Okay, so here's the book's central thesis. The AIDS virus, it wasn't some accident of nature. The author's whole argument is that it was actually engineered in a lab. It was a man-made biological weapon designed with a truly chilling genocidal purpose. And to understand why the author goes there, why he uses such an extreme title, you have to look at the sheer scale of the epidemic he's talking about. We're talking about 35 million deaths. Think about that for a second. In his view, a tragedy of that magnitude, well, he argues it's on the scale of a Holocaust. So, okay, how in the world does the author even begin to connect these dots? Well, his entire theory really hinges on one single, infamous historical event, an event that he argues we've all completely misunderstood. And that event? It's the Jonestown massacre in Guyana back in 1978. But in the book's narrative, what we think we know about Jonestown is not the real story at all. So you've got two completely different stories here. The official story, the one we all know, is that it was a mass suicide of a religious cult. But the book's claim? It's that Jonestown was actually a front, a covert CIA lab for experimenting with mind control and, yes, viruses.
So, according to the book, the whole People's Temple agricultural and medical project thing was just a cover story. Its real purpose, the author alleges, was to test a brand new virus on a population they could completely control. This, in the author's view, makes Jonestown ground zero for the epidemic. Now, for a plot this huge, you'd need some key players, right? Well, to build his case, the author connects a pretty wild cast of characters from all these different worlds, claiming they were all in on this one single secret plot. And the names involved in this alleged conspiracy are pretty shocking. First, you've got Jim Jones, who's painted not as a cult leader, but as a CIA operative. The ideological mastermind behind it all? The author claims it was the infamous Nazi doctor, the Angel of Death, Josef Mengele. Then he connects them to some key American figures. Dr. Lawrence Layton, who was the director of the U.S. Army's Chemical and Biological Warfare Division. His wife, Lisa Layton, who's alleged to be a deep-cover Nazi agent. And Dan Matrone, a CIA torture expert and supposedly a childhood friend of Jim Jones. Okay, wait a second. A Nazi doctor, a CIA operative, a U.S. bioweapons chief. How could a group like that possibly be connected? It seems totally out there, right? Well, the book tries to answer that by tracing the whole thing way, way back, all the way to the end of World War II. Yep, you heard that right. According to the author, the real starting point for the story isn't the 70s with Jonestown. It's the 1940s, and it all starts with a very real, well-documented secret program. And that program was called Operation Paperclip. Now, historically, this was a real, secret U.S. program after World War II to bring over like 1,600 German scientists and engineers. The idea was to get their expertise before the Soviets could, but the author argues that this program brought over a lot more than just rocket scientists. He claims it imported a dangerous ideology and the people who knew how to put it into practice. So when you look at it from the book's perspective, you can see the long game being played. It all supposedly kicks off in 1945 with Operation Paperclip, bringing Nazi scientists to the U.S. Then, in 1947, the CIA is formed, and the book alleges it brought in old Nazi intelligence networks. Fast forward to 1953, and you get Project MKUltra, the infamous mind control studies. And it all culminates almost 30 years later in 1973, when Jones's team first arrives in Guyana to set up Jonestown. And the author points to the official justification for programs like Paperclip, using quotes just like this one from a U.S. intelligence official. I mean, the thinking at the time was pretty clear. Letting all those brilliant scientists get recruited by the Soviets was a way bigger threat than whatever they might have done in their past.
So, you've got the people, you've got the ideology, but how does all of that lead to a viral weapon? Well, this is where the author's narrative gets to the final stage, the actual creation and unleashing of the virus.
The claim in the book is that the virus was basically created by mashing two things together. First, you take Josef Mengele's research into diseases that could target specific genetic groups. Then, you combine that with the technology from America's own biowarfare programs, like the one that Dr. Layton was in charge of.
And then, according to the author, the endgame played out in 4 distinct steps. First step, you test your new virus on the completely isolated population of Jonestown. Step 2, you stage a mass suicide to eliminate all the witnesses and cover up the whole experiment. Step 3, you let a handful of intentionally infected survivors escape on a ship called the Albatross. And the final step, Step 4, those carriers spread the virus to Haiti, kicking off what would become the global AIDS epidemic.
So, in the end, what the book presents is this incredibly complex web of connections, tying together historical events and secret operations. It really leaves you with one massive question. Is this some kind of uncovered, suppressed history of a man-made catastrophe? Or is it one of the most grand, most elaborate conspiracy theories ever put together? And that, really, is the question at the very heart of this second Holocaust.